Hey, work from homers, Adam Schroeder here. We love bringing you this podcast, and thousands of you have proven that it's been helpful for you. But since time and online storage space aren't free, Naresh and I wanted to come to you personally to ask for your financial support through Patreon. Go to patreon.com/workfromhomeshow and help support the show. And we appreciate your support at any amount you choose. That's patreon.com/workfromhomeshow. Thanks for your support. Let's get to the show.
Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Work From Home Show. I'm your host, Naresh Vissa with Adam Schroeder. Shout out to all our homies, homeboys, homegirls, home trans, all the work from homers out there. Today we have Rabbi Steve Leder on the show. He's the Senior Rabbi of the Wilshire Boulevard Temple in Los Angeles. Really, really well-known place of worship worldwide. He was twice named in Newsweek Magazine's list of the 10 most influential rabbis in America, and he's a New York Times bestselling author of More Beautiful Than Before, How Suffering Transforms Us, and The Beauty of What Remains, How Our Greatest Fear Becomes Our Greatest Gift. Rabbi Steve Leder, welcome to the Work From Home Show.
Thank you. Very happy to be with you guys today.
Yeah, and I think your books are extremely relevant to the year 2020, the year 2021, as far as lockdowns go, a very, very divisive political landscape, not just here in the United States, but worldwide. Mm-hmm. So after all of the pandemonium, the chaos, it's still going on. It's not over by any means. Mm-hmm. Let's first start with your keys to happiness, relaxation, and building gratitude during these times. What do you recommend?
You know, this new book is called The Beauty of What Remains, because that's the challenge when we've lost so much, is to somehow find a way to move from focusing on the loss to focusing on literally the beauty that remains, the beauty of what remains in our life. And in some ways, if we're smart about it and soulful about it, we can use loss in a very constructive way. I think the pandemic is a good example of the opportunity of loss. And I'm not for a moment am I dismissing the pain and the misery that the pandemic has caused and that the political insanity we're going through right now is causing. I'm not trying to diminish or ignore the pain. I'm not denying the fact that we're all going through hell right now. What I am saying is that we don't have to come out of hell empty-handed. Right? We can use the lessons that loss comes to teach us to ennoble our lives. And the big one, of course, is gratitude. Gratitude for all that remains. You know, sometimes in a stripping away, there's a kind of essentialism left behind that's very beautiful. I think we've discovered that in the pandemic. You know, look at the beauty that has emerged since we all stopped running around, you know, driving on the freeway to get to a meeting with 3 people we could have done a Zoom with. Driving and shopping, having breakfast, lunch, and business dinners with people we don't care about, wearing uncomfortable clothes, putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations. One of the things that the pandemic has taught us, I hope, is that a busy life is not necessarily a meaningful life. And death comes to teach us the same lesson. It comes to teach us that it's who we have, not what we have, that matters. It slows us down. It helps us appreciate the fleeting and finite nature of time and life itself. And ideally leads us to a more beautiful, love-filled life ourselves. So a lot of the answer to your question is the conscious choice to count our blessings, the conscious choice to slow down, and the conscious choice, which I'm sure we'll get into, to face the grief of loss and turn it into something more than just grief.
You have a quote, I'm assuming it's yours, on your website that says, "They say every preacher has one sermon, one truth that he delivers 100 different ways. Mine is to inspire in us all a life worthy of our suffering, a life gentler, wiser, and more beautiful than before. How have you been communicating that with your congregation during this time?
I've been writing a weekly Shabbat message, a weekly late Friday afternoon message to the congregation. I started in March when the pandemic began in Los Angeles. And the mayor said, we're going to lock down for 2 weeks and try and flatten this curve. And I thought, 2 weeks, I can write a couple of pieces and get them out to people and try and guide them through this. Last week, I finished my 40th. So, I have 40 times now reached out to the congregation and tried to help guide them through. So that's one of the big ways. Also, everything is online now. So I'm teaching a lot online. And all of our worship services are online, and we're finding more people, not less, are participating because they don't have to deal with the horrible traffic that existed in LA before all this mess began. So I've tried to lead with the written word, the spoken word, and lots of presence online. And I had no idea when I started this book about loss 2 years ago that it would land in the middle of a global pandemic. But I'm glad that it has, because I'm also trying to help people through this book to, accept it as a kind of field guide through the journey of loss and the opportunity that loss presents us to have a deeper appreciation for our own lives and the beauty that abounds.
Yeah, Rabbi, we actually had a previous rabbi on our show. I don't know if you've heard of him, Rabbi Evan Moffick out of the Chicago area. And he told us how the religious space, his job, the congregation, how it's changed so much in a matter of 2 months. It went from the usual daily routine, weekly stuff that you guys do to the online and digital, doing funerals online. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts, because we've had a lot of economists on the show, a lot of experts, but as far as the brick and mortar synagogues go, post-pandemic, what is the future of faith, of brick and mortar locations, not just synagogues, but temples, mosques, etc.?
Yeah.
And do you think we're just going to go back to how things were in 2019? I
think we're going to do both. I am not at all convinced that this marks the end of brick and mortar religion, particularly because, specifically in Judaism, it is so driven by the pediatrics of life. We have 7 different schools. We have 2 elementary schools, 3 early childhood centers, and 2 Sunday schools. And we have all seen, I think quite convincingly, the very real limitations of online learning for children. It's not optimal. So, and because the religious enterprise is so driven by children, I think we are still going to very much be a brick and mortar people. And I also believe there'll be a parallel track of virtual and online offerings that I don't think we'll ever stop offering. But I don't think they're going to be the sum total of how the community gathers and shares, because as amazing as this technology is that we're using this very moment, as amazing as Zoom is, as amazing as Skype is, as amazing as FaceTime is, it's not the same as touching and holding people you love and care about. And it's not the same as singing together. And it's not the same as praying together. So I'm not at all convinced that this is a radical break from bricks and mortar. I think it is going to be a permanent accompaniment. I think they're going to be complementary and in relationship with each other. I don't think that one is going to entirely supplant the other. I don't buy it.
Yeah, I've found throughout the pandemic and the lockdown and everything that I don't do online church well. It's way too easy for me to just skip and ignore and not deal with. You talked a little bit earlier about kind of finding the good that comes out of it and kind of having the gratitude for what it remains. What are some techniques people can use to actually identify those things in their life? Because it's so easy just to go, well, this person did this to me, and I had this family member die from COVID, and I haven't been able to go to my favorite restaurant. So how do you identify the good parts in your life right now?
Well, I hope that one of the things the pandemic has taught us all is that a little is a lot, and that good is really great. And so I urge people to literally try to count 100 blessings a day. This goes back to a legend about King David and a plague, by the way, so it's relevant. According to this legend, there was a plague that was killing 100 people a day during the reign of King David. So King David and his advisors decided that as a counterweight, a counterbalance or antidote to the plague, they would require every member of the kingdom to count 100 blessings a day. And the plague stopped. Now, of course, it's a legend, but what should not for a moment be dismissed is the power of gratitude for the most ordinary of blessings. And for me personally, the pandemic has helped me appreciate ordinary things much more. One of the most popular messages I sent out to the congregation was on this very point, where I talked about how I that week was frankly a little depressed by all of this, and how much rye toast with butter lifted my spirits. I love rye toast with butter, by the way. And it was really an essay about the beauty of the simplest, most basic things. And if we can be grateful for a slice of bread, we can be grateful for life's greater blessings too. And I think that's what it means to be a spiritual person. I think to be a spiritual person means that you sanctify the mundane, that there's no such thing as a small miracle, that every miracle is enormous. So I really urge people to literally count their blessings. Can you get to 100 today? Because I'll tell you something, it's hard to be depressed if you're grateful. So as cliche as it sounds, count your blessings. And there are many, many. And let's not take these blessings for gratitude that have been taken away from us. I mean, the pandemic has made me so grateful for food on the table, for a job I could do from home, for a hand to hold under the covers at night, for bread and butter, for touch, to be able to hold and be held. And these are things that we so often take for granted. So I just urge all of us to really focus. I mean, this is why I called the book The Beauty of What Remains. That's the wisdom of life, is to embrace the beauty of what remains. And loss reveals that beauty in stark relief.
Yeah, and I have to say, Rabbi, I think it's easy to write a book and talk about gratitude, but in my case, and I think this is a case with, I don't want to speak for everybody, I think it's a case for many people who don't show that gratitude, who don't have that thankfulness. I think it's largely because they haven't gone through the pain or the suffering that you talk about. And we've said 2020, 2021, very painful year, whether you lost your job or a family member lost their job or somebody passed for whatever reason. It doesn't have to be virus related. But still, many people didn't really face those hardships or suffering. And in my case, at least to me personally, I faced my own demons and suffering when I was younger. Mm-hmm. And went through those, and that's why I always show gratitude. Every day I pray. I'm of a different faith than you. I'm a Hindu. Every day after I shower, I pray, and I just really, people asking, "Oh, what are you praying? What are you asking for? What are you saying?" And outside of a few prayers, it's just giving thanks. Yes. Every day when I go to sleep, I just look up at the ceiling and I give thanks. Thanks for another day. Every day when I wake up, thank you, I made it to another day. Yeah. And again, I didn't do this 12 years ago, 13 years ago, but it's going through that pain and that suffering and seeing what real pain and suffering is. And what's your recommendation to our listeners who haven't seen that pain and suffering?
Well, their day is coming, of course, because to be human is to suffer.
Yes, exactly.
Look, I wrote this book after my father died. I could have written it before my father died, but it wouldn't have been as good a book, because there are certain things that just have to be lived in order to be understood. You just You just cannot get there any other way. So I can't really make a recommendation to someone, who hasn't been in the water about how they should swim. I would just say that try your hardest to be grateful for what you have, and of course not for what, but for who. I think the pandemic has taught us it's who we have, not what we have, that really matters. But people aren't going to get it until they have to, and that's just the way it is. So I wouldn't give it too much worry, because their opportunity is coming, and the pandemic, I think, has given us all the opportunity. I don't think the pandemic has left any of us untouched by fear, and so I think we all have this opportunity now. I'm glad the book has landed when it's landed, because everyone is suffering with loss right now. No one has escaped this thing.
Yeah, and with regard to death, we talked about, you said your time is kind of, if you haven't felt the pain or the suffering, we're human. It's just, if you have never suffered or felt pain in your life, please hello@workfromhomeshow.com. Reach out to us. We'd love to have you on the show and get your secrets.
I'm not going to hold my breath for that email.
Yeah, you're not going to get any emails.
Well, you'll be surprised at how many people. I mean, there are people, they might be hiding it. I don't know, but anyway, talking about death. Death is something that I've always thought about or talked about from a philosophical or religious perspective. It's something that I've planned for, even when I was living in the downtown Baltimore, not dying there, but just in general. The only thing we know in life is death and taxes, but really death. It's the only thing that's guaranteed in life. And going back to the whole gratitude thing, it surprised me how many people just woke up to the reality of death. And it took a pandemic for people to understand and realize, like, oh, people die. I mean, every year in the United States, you have over 2.5 million people die. It goes up every year as the population goes up.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a reflection of not the number of people dying, but people waking up to, death is real, and funeral homes aren't just there to take up real estate. Like, there's actual business being done inside of there. And I think it shows a lack of gratitude. I don't know how it is in other countries, but I think it shows a lot that we had a lack of gratitude.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that, because in many countries, death is not sanitized and professionalized the way it is in the United States. So death is kept at arm's length in the United States in most cases. Everyone says they want to die at home, but 80% of Americans do not die at home. And when they do die, their bodies are whisked away. And what do we do with those bodies? We dress them in suits and ties and dresses and put makeup on them to make them look less dead. And we really do sanitize death in this country, and I don't think it's to our benefit. And so it enables the denial. Now, eventually, of course, death comes to someone we love, and it pierces that denial, and it's a wake-up call. And the point in my book is, it doesn't only have to be a wake-up call to fear and negativity. It can be a wake-up call to really take your life seriously and make the most of it, and not just be alive, but really live. And that's the opportunity that death presents us. And in my opinion, this might sound like a hyperbolic statement and an overreach, but I really think death is the only teacher. It's the only thing that really teaches us to lead a meaningful life. Kafka said that the meaning of life is that it ends. And I think it's really that simple and that true, that it's what imbues life with meaning. Imagine for a moment, and I talk about this a little bit in the book, imagine a deathless life. How meaningful would a deathless life really be? Not very. There'd be no ambition. No one would marry. No one would have children. No one would build or create anything, because really, what would be the point? So it is the most powerful creative teacher and influence in life is actually death. And the more we embrace that truth, the more meaningful and purposeful and beautiful life will be. But you're right. We keep it at arm's length in this country, and it is not to our benefit.
I want to touch a little bit on your book about More Money Than God, Living a Rich Life Without Losing Your Soul, because this pandemic and the lockdowns and everything has really kind of shown us, and we've talked about it on the show before, the different economies that are in the U.S., those who are able to work from home, those who aren't, and it's really kind of sped up the whole wealth gap between the two people. And a lot of people have done really well this year, and maybe even better than they've done before. How do you live the rich life without losing your soul as you start getting more money and you realize that people are, worse off than they were at the beginning of last year? How do you kind of reconcile those two things of your great life, their worsening life, and dealing with that?
Well, one thing you can do is give more away. Let's start with that. I'm obviously a religious person. The Bible's very clear that we're supposed to tithe. We're supposed to give 10%, adjusted gross, thank goodness, but we're supposed to give 10% of what we have to those who have less. And let's keep in mind, that's the floor. That's not the ceiling. You can give 20%, 30%, whatever you want. So one thing we can do for those of us who are on the benefit side of this pandemic, and I think you're quite right to say it. It's kind of one of the dark secrets of the pandemic is that some people are making more money, not less. My dark secret of the pandemic is my life is more manageable under these circumstances than it was before. So we all, I think, have a kind of dark secret upside to this downside. And if it's money, I would say give more away. 1 in 6 Americans are hungry. Give more away. So I think that's one simple answer. But the other thing, and I'm not trying to be utopian or Pollyannish about this, but I think it's important to understand also that how much money someone does or does not have does not determine their self-worth. Our net worth and our self-worth are not the same thing. People try to pretend they're the same thing, but they're not the same thing. And that book, More Money Than God, was really my plea to people not to confuse their outer material life, however rich or modest, but don't confuse what you have materially with who you are. Don't confuse your outer material life with a spiritual life. I said in that book, thinking that your outer life, your material life, is an inner life is like trying to eat a picture of food. It's an idol. It's fake, and it won't nourish you. And I think the pandemic really has taught us that it's taken away so many material pleasures, but it's made room, therefore, for cooking and baking with our family, dinner with our kids, walks, simple walks, right? Sitting together on the couch, watching a movie. It's none of those things cost much. And it's really helped us, I think, understand again that it's time and people who matter. It's not stuff. There's a chapter in the new book called Nobody Wants Your Crap. and it's meant as a double entendre, both your psychological and your physical stuff. Most people spend most of their life making money to buy stuff. And what you find out after people die is that 95% or more of what they spent their life acquiring, no one, not their children, not their grandchildren, not the neighbors, no one wants it. No one. Nobody wants your crap.
It's the bane of most kids' existence whenever their parents pass.
Right. So what are you doing spending your life in the pursuit of crap? What are you doing? Wake up.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Talking about going back to pain, though, in your book, your latest book, you talk about the stages of pain or pain's stages. Can you quickly walk us through those stages?
Yeah, I think you're actually referring to not to the new book that just came out, but to the More Beautiful Than Before book, which
Okay.
which breaks pain down into surviving, healing, and growing. Because I think those are the three really major rubrics or stages of pain. First, you have to survive it, whatever it is. And the first chapter in that section of surviving pain is called When You Must, You Can. Because most people can, when they have to, survive terrible, terrible things. I've seen parents bury their child in a coffin the size of a shoebox. And 5 years later, I see them at the movie laughing and eating popcorn. Not because they're superhuman, but because they're ordinary humans. We all have this ability to survive when we must. So the first stage is to survive the pain. The second stage is to heal, is to be able to pause and nurture yourself, to accept help from others, and to heal. By the way, that reaching out to others and accepting help is so important. No one suffers pain better alone. No one. There was a very interesting study years ago with college kids, and they put a college kid alone in a room and asked each kid to put his or her feet in an ice bucket, in a bucket of ice water. And then they asked people to do it again, but there was someone else in the room with them, so they weren't alone. And the people who had someone with them when they put their feet in the ice water were able to put their feet in much longer, almost twice as long. So it's a kind of graphic physical example of the fact that we don't suffer pain better alone. Pain is better when we share it with someone, when we reach out. So that is the healing process. Nature is very healing. Reaching out to others for help is healing. A pause is healing. Prayer is healing. And I talk about all those things. And then the third is growing. Dostoevsky said his greatest fear was that his life would not be worthy of his suffering. I think that's such a profound idea. Can we be worthy of the suffering we have endured? Because that's a meaningful and a beautiful life.
Now, you said one thing during that I thought, most people in society, I don't know if they even know how to do it, and that was pause. Mm-hmm. In today's world, how do you pause?
Well, in today's world, frankly, it's a little easier than it's ever been for a lot of us.
Yeah, okay. So outside of late 2019, yes, early 2020, how do you pause in today's world?
One approach, which is ancient and beautiful and powerful, is the Sabbath. Take it seriously. There are two kinds of commandments in the Bible. They're called positive and negative commandments. Positive commandments are the thou shalt, and the negative commandments are the thou shalt nots. And when it comes to the Sabbath for Jews, it is almost entirely about negative commandments, all the things you stop doing. And it is amazing when you are disciplined enough to stop behaviors. I'm talking not about every day, 1/7 of our life, unplug. Can you unplug 1/7 of your life? Can you get off social media 1 day a week? Can you not shop and do business 1 day a week? Can you not spend money 1 day a week? Can you not answer emails and pay bills 1 day a week? Because what we discover when we observe these negative commandments is it creates this vacuum in which very beautiful things begin to emerge. I wrote an essay once. It's in the third book, not the new book, but the most recent, the penultimate book. And the essay was called "Weeds Bring Yellow Birds." Just to give you the story quickly, I had a very frightening car accident, and it resulted in opioids and steroids and spinal surgery and more opioids and depression and steroids, and it really threw me. And I was not myself for about a year. And I live in Los Angeles, and we have a very steep hill in our backyard that I had spent, a decade getting the weeds out of. I was out there every other day with my OCD problem, just removing every freaking weed I could because I just wanted nothing but dark green ivy on that hill. And then I got in a car accident and had the surgery, and I was depressed and addicted to opioids, and it was awful. And I didn't even go outside for about 4 months. And then when I was well enough to walk into the backyard and just, lay down on a chair in the sun, and I was still in a kind of, steroid and narcotic haze back then. I opened my eyes and I looked at that back hill, and it was a forest of weeds. And then I looked more carefully, and I saw and heard this flock of tiny little yellow birds flitting around. And they were never there before when I was cutting all those weeds back. And so I wrote this piece called Weeds Bring Yellow Birds. And it's really about how when we stop certain behaviors, beautiful things emerge. So I would say be disciplined about spending a seventh of your life removing rather than adding to your life. Stop imposing your will on the world and allow the world just to be and be with it yourself. So I think taking the Sabbath seriously can really, really change our lives for the better. I know it's done that for me.
Do you truly believe that people have learned this spiritual knowledge in 20 and 2021? Or again, are we going to go back to our regular ways? We meaning the masses. Anyone listening to this show, I think, will fall into that bucket of trying to improve themselves, trying to gain spiritual knowledge. But I'm just talking about the masses.
I think most people will go back to most of their default settings. But under the concept that a little is a lot, right? A little is a lot. Let's think about that for a moment. So if this thing helps us change our habits, our negative habits, 10%, just 10%, give me 10%, that's going to make your life enormously better. So a little is a lot. And I'll be happy if we only go back to 90% of our default settings and we hold on to 10% of the positive lifestyle changes that the pandemic has forced upon us. I'm good with that. I think that's a win.
Agreed. Well, Rabbi Steve Leder, thanks so much for joining us on the Work From Home show. You're the senior rabbi of the Wilshire Boulevard Temple in Los Angeles, twice named in Newsweek Magazine's list of 10 most influential rabbis in America. New York Times bestselling author of More Beautiful Than Before, How Suffering Transforms Us, as well as a new book, The Beauty of What Remains, How Our Greatest Fear Becomes Our Greatest Gift. The website is Steve Leder, that's L-E-D-E-R, not L-E-A-D, but L-E-D-E-R, steveleder.com. Rabbi Leder, any final thoughts you want to share with our listeners or anything else you want to promote?
Find me on Instagram, Steve_Leder, L-E-D-E-R, and you can go into links in the bio there and get the book and follow me. And you can always Google me and follow me on the Temple website. But mostly what I want to leave everyone with is faith in themselves and faith in each other, that we really can embrace the beauty of what remains when this thing is behind us, and it will be behind us.
I got one quick question.
Sure.
So what's the difference between a temple and a synagogue? I always thought a Jewish place of worship is called a synagogue.
There's no difference. It's just the language changed when the German Jews arrived in the United States, and they did not want to seem too Eastern European or ethnic, for lack of a better word. They felt that the word temple was a more American concept than the word synagogue. So any of these synagogues, for example, mine was founded in 1862. So any of these synagogues that were founded in the late 1800s and early 1900s by German or Western European Jews, they preferred temple to synagogue because it sounded more American. But they're really the same thing. They're really the same thing.
Gotcha. Thanks for clearing that up. That's a great answer.
Yeah.
So to all our listeners, check us out, workfromhomeshow.com. Email us again, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. If you've never suffered or experienced pain, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. Get on our mailing list. We're giving away more free goodies to everyone on our email list. Leave us reviews on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever podcasting platform you listen to us. And until next time, keep on working from home.